Well, this is Dave Gaddis, and today is February 18th, 2015, and today we're interviewing Joe Vining. We're here at the offices of the Institute of Urban Studies at the University of Texas at Arlington. Anyway, welcome, Joe. And
thank you, Dave.
Let's start at the very beginning and tell us when and where you were born.
Well, I was born June 18th, 1945 in Dallas County, Dallas, Texas.
Okay. Did you live there all your childhood? Or did you
I did. I lived there all my childhood and until I went off to the University of Texas in 1963.
Okay, and what did your parents do that had you in Dallas?
Well, my dad was a mechanic. He and his father had an automotive shop, which is now the Woodall Rogers Freeway. And, you know, Mom was a homemaker.
Okay. So you graduated, what high school did you graduate?
South Oak Cliff.
Okay. That seems like an awful long way from Woodall Rogers, but I guess...
Well, yeah. But of course, in South Oak Cliff, it's really a pretty short commute into downtown Dallas. So it's not that far. But,
okay. So then you graduated high school and you went off to college directly?
I did. I went to UT. I was an architecture major to begin with.
Okay.
One of those dreams I had since I was in the 8th grade. And
why architecture?
I had an experience in junior high with a shop teacher who also taught mechanical drawing, and he introduced me to Frank Lloyd Wright, and so well, I was hooked. You know, and that was pretty simple, but just a simple connection like that.
And so, how was the architecture program at UT?
It was a great program. Unfortunately, I wasn't really ready for college. I was supplying all the funds for my college education. So I had a lot of fits and starts. You know, I could go a semester, and then I had to go work, and then I would go another year, and then I'd go work, and that sort of thing. So I had quite a while to get my undergraduate degree.
Okay, and where were you working during that time?
Yeah, I had a number of jobs, 2 of them of some significance that helped me in my planning career. The first one, I got a summer drafting job with Texas Power and Light out in the Irving office, and actually worked on the 635 project. That was in inception back, this was 1966. So that's how far back they were working on this thing. And then the next year, I got a summer job with the Southern Union Gas Company, which has now changed a couple of times since then. But their headquarters, both of those headquarters are right in downtown Dallas. And I had another drafting job there, and you know, they all saw about right place at the right time, that sort of thing. My immediate supervisor was really into aerial photography, and of course in those days it was in its infancy, and so with the product that you would get from those low level flights were little 9x9 photographs and that sort of thing. So we were kind of interested in it, and as it turned out, Galveston is not only one of their cities, but it's the oldest gas distribution system in the whole U.S. They used to manufacture their own gas down on Market Street, and they had or Avenue D, and they had a gas plant. Anyway, I was down there mapping the town, that's incorrect. The town was already mapped, obviously, but I was trying to map the facilities on a new base map. And because they had terrible, terrible records. It was a lot of folks' heads, you know, old-time working practices. Well, by chance, I overheard a guy from the city and an engineering firm having lunch in Guido's one day, and they were talking about flying the city. And so I just couldn't control myself. I got up and walked over, introduced myself, and I said, I think you might have another partner in this thing if you'd like. And I told them who I was and so forth, and they would, let's talk. So I called my boss and raced back to Dallas, and he said, absolutely, and we came right back and ended up flying the city, part of that project, and I mapped it all out. And it turned out so well. and was so easy to use. It was a 1 to 100 scale on like 30 by 40 Mylars, and you know, all hand drawn in those days with, you know, rapidograph, that sort of thing. We're talking old school.
Right.
And it was so successful, and it was coming time to go back to school, and Southern Union was involved in a production company in Australia. And so just like 3 weeks before I was going to leave, my boss brought in and had delivered all these Kodak boxes full of aerial photos. And he said, "You're going to lay out a pipeline from Roma to Brisbane right here in your office." And I went, "Do I have a road map?" You know, he said, "No, it's going cross country." So anyway, long story short, I laid out this pipeline just really quick. And I got sent to Australia, and they looked at it and said, "This will work. Can you send that guy over here?" And so they made me an offer to go to Australia, but it was a 3-year commitment. And I thought, man, I'll never come back to school, you know. And so I said, "Thank you very much," and went back to UT. And anyway, I had a lot of interruptions in that time, various personal things and involvement with racing sports cars and things like that kind of sent me off course, so to speak. And so it wasn't until 1975, when I met my wife Carla, that I realized that I really need to get busy and finish my degree, because if I wanted to marry her, I thought her parents would probably have a problem with somebody that had taken so long to get his undergraduate degree.
So you finished your degree in what field?
I finally gave up. You know, I realized I had a good friend that I used to race cars with who had already graduated from architecture school, was working for a very prominent firm in Austin. But I was making more money than he was working for the city of Austin. And I was working in the electric department in power production. I was a data analyst. And so it finally hit me one day that not only was I not having any fun in architecture, but the realization that I couldn't design what I liked. I had to design for something that would sell. Duh. How long does it take to figure that out? Well, I finally figured that out. And so Carl was in government, and I looked at her course catalog one day, and I went, "Well, I could get a government degree if I take Spanish and 3 government classes. What's wrong with this picture?" So I did that and finished quickly in government. And here's the really sad part of all the story, I guess, is that all the time I was in the School of Architecture, I had no idea that the planning department was upstairs. They just didn't interface on a middle level, you know, or lower level. And if any interface, it was only with the 5th year classes, that sort of thing, in those days. So again, try to end this longer story, a good friend of mine at the city of Austin knew that I had all this city experience because I had been working for the city of Austin for quite a while, especially in utilities. And he said, "There's a project coming up that you'd be great on, because it's got a lot of infrastructure changes in this old neighborhood." It was in the Clarksville neighborhood, and it was going to be really difficult because some of the streets were so narrow and no dedicated right-of-way, et cetera, et cetera. So I applied, but the 2 candidates that I was a finalist with both had masters from UT, and so I went, that's where I need to go. So I went and pursued that and got my degree, and my plan from there was to you know, get a planning job. Well, unfortunately, in 1980, the market was pretty soft for planners. The economy was terrible and everything, and at that time, the city of Austin was being extremely aggressive in an affirmative action program. And so a white male was having a very tough time getting hired. And even though I was a city employee, it was extremely, I couldn't transfer. Dick Lilly was one of my profs, and you know, Dick sat me down one day and said, "Here's the deal," you know. So I said, "Well, I'll just wait." And the whole plan was we were going to get back to the Metroplex, okay? and because there were a lot more planning jobs in the Metroplex. And so just happened by chance to see a job posted one day. Actually, it was the last day of its posting for the city of Round Rock. And a couple of my colleagues were laughing at it because the pay was so low. It was $14,100. This was end of November 1980. And so, long story short, I take the notice. It was on a Friday. I had gone back to Nauta to land use course with the dean that I couldn't ever work in my schedule. And that's how I was there on campus. But anyway, I had a resume with me, so I just drove up to Round Rock, thinking at lunchtime I'd just drop off the resume and see if I got a call. And sure enough, Paul Gambrill was there. He'd had lunch at his desk, and he interviewed me on the spot. So I went back to my office to tell Carla about this. Hey, I interviewed for a job. And she said, well, how much does it pay? When I told her, she went, we can't do that. We had just bought a house, you know. And so anyway, so we made the decision over the weekend that if he offered it, we needed to accept it. And the scheme, the plan, the great plan was this would be a short-term stop. And I'll go interview and find some place in the Metroplex, and we can move up there. Well, again, right place at the right time. Paul left the city after about a year and a half, I guess, to pursue a PhD in linguistics. He was a UT grad from the planning department, but he had a passion for linguistics. And so Bob Bennett, our city manager, rather than go through the hiring process knowing that the economy was fixing to head up, decided to take a chance on me as planning director. And the rest is history.
Okay.
So,
well, let's go back to UT for a second. Can you remember, you mentioned Dick as one of your profs. Any other professors that made an impact on you? Or?
Yeah, starting with Dean McClure. Ed McClure had taken over the department about a year prior to me interviewing, and was really changing the culture. And he was doing a good job. Terry Kahn, Kent Butler was there. You know, we had some really, Sandra
Rosenblum?
Thank you very much. Was our transportation guru, and you know, we just had some really good folks, and it was fortunate for me as being one of the elder statesmen in the class. I had a distinct advantage because a lot of the students had very small work experience, if at all, coming right out of their undergraduate, and especially my city experiences. I understood the reality of how cities worked and what it took I understood how to do a bond program and what it took to put the funds together and plan the projects out years ahead. And of course, working for the electric utility, our future look was the short term, the real short term, and it was 10 and 20 because we were looking at the lifespan of those generators, and we were going to have to go buy land and build a new power plant, and we were just getting into coal and nuclear and things like that. So I had some really good work experiences, although you wouldn't think about them so much in terms of city planning as we know it. But it really helped me run a CIP program and things like that.
So you started Round Rock and you're planning director after a year. So tell me about Round Rock back when you first started.
Well, in December of 1980, 13,000 folks. And I see we had 2 traffic lights. We had no HEB. I take that back. We had a real small one. It had just opened up. And, you know, the sad thing is we truly were a bedroom community. We hated it, being called that. I mean, we really hated that. What we like to say is that we were Austin's amenity package to the north, and that was the way we thought of ourselves. But the truth was we had to go into Austin for everything. When our daughter Brooke was born, there was no hospital in Round Rock. That didn't come until 1983, almost 84. And so all of our higher level medical services were all down there, dentists, everything. You know, we still had a community to grow. And the major employers, although we had some really very fortunate early successes, like the Westinghouse plant is the biggest one. You know, by and large, everyone's commuting into Austin and going to work there. I think the most notable thing about those early days is we had an extremely forward-thinking council. These were all business people, and well, I should tell you why they were forward-thinking. And there's a little connection here. In 1978, the city of Round Rock ran out of water. The growth curve on Round Rock started like 76. And what had happened, Austin AISD had just passed a busing policy where they're going to start busing kids. And there was a serious white flight to Round Rock because people started looking around for other school choices, and our schools, even then, were rated very highly, even though there was only one high school, that sort of thing, 2 middle schools, something like that. And so one builder in particular started building ranch style 2-car garage single family houses that were nice and affordable, you know, mostly all masonry. Anyway, that started our growth spurt. The problem was all the water supply was on wells. We had 5 wells, 4 really good ones, and well, it didn't take long till a kind of a tough, hot summer, and some folks came home on Friday afternoon and starting to water their yards really heavy, turning on the tap, and some really ugly looking stuff came out. Well, as you can imagine, there was this excited entourage to meet with the city council. I've heard that Bob Bennett call it that. And so the council immediately said, you know, we got to go find some real water. And so Bennett led the charge with the council that we were going to do a long-term water reach, and that we couldn't do it along, you know, golly, 13,000, 14,000 folks. Geez, we didn't have the money to do that. So we started trying to put together a regional water plan in the county. And we couldn't get any of the other cities to go in with us because they hadn't run out of water. They weren't having the growth. And they went, you know, you guys are out of control. You need to take care of your own problems. We're not out of water, blah, blah, blah. And so we had to come back and convince the council that even though it was going to be extremely expensive, we had to go and secure water rights from the Brazos River Authority for the future, because we knew we were going to grow. In fact, the general plan that Bob Bennett did in 1970 had a unique comparison of the growth of all the Metroplex cities and Round Rock. And what it showed how Irving, Plano, Richardson, you know, all the Metroplex cities that were really 15 years ahead of us already, 20 years ahead of us. And we said, you know, this is what we're going to have that same kind of curve, and here's why. And it was just, it stayed on target for almost 12 years. I mean, all the points on the graph were just dead on. And then it even went higher up. But anyway, using that kind of information and in that kind of presentation to the council, and the council believed in us, we did go to the Brazos River Authority and secured half of the rights to Lake Georgetown, and which was quite a political hot potato, as you might guess, and then we secured about 40% Stillhouse Hollow, which, and that all didn't happen at first. Stillhouse came after that, okay? But anyway, as you might guess, there was a lot of people going, oh, you guys better be right, because we're spending a lot of money reserving water. And oh, by the way, how are we going to get that water here? So the plan was, we put a straw in Stillhouse, took it to Georgetown, and replenished the Georgetown pool, and then a pipe down to our water plant, which is on our north side by Westinghouse. And we started treating the lake water like that. We still had our wells, and we stayed ahead of the curve on the water. But right after that, of course, the wastewater treatment plant was needing some help. But our forward approach really convinced Wall Street that we were looking at the future, and they saw, we told them about how we thought we were going to be to Austin as Plano was to Dallas and that sort of thing. And those were some of the same rating analysts that were looking at the Metroplex. So they said, we see those similarities.
So what kinds of projects did you do? I assume that one of the things you updated the comprehensive plan at some point in time?
The first update I did was in 80, and then in 90, and then in 2000. We were so busy that doing more frequent updates, and that's just not a cop-out. That if you saw the amount of work and the size of our staff, it was just absolutely incredible. Some of the things that were going on. At the time, Austin was really developing their reputation, if you will, as being a very difficult city to do business, because they were doing some really forward thinking and creating some great environmental regs to protect the aquifer. And so the process became so difficult and so cumbersome and so lengthy that we were known as the can-do guys, and that if you want to do a project, you really ought to look up here. And so we kind of hit a period there in the end of 1989 and early 90s that really caused things to snowball. We'd had, in the late 80s, we'd had a couple of companies move from Austin because they could not expand. Just could not get a permit. And the first incentive deal that I worked on was with a company called Texas Nuclear. And the name just absolutely scared people. Well, they used a little bitty, teeny tiny, bit of device, and they had all these very, very sophisticated instruments to measure things. And, the radiation from it was just zip. But anyway, we convinced them. They were looking around, and their director came to us and said, I really need to move, but I can't expand, and would you guys help me move? So, long story short, that was the first company that we offered a tax incentive to, and it was a whopping 50% tax abatement for 5 years. Whoopee. But it was enough to get him going. And then right after that, 2 other smaller companies came, and so the word started circulating in Central Texas that we were really open for business, and we were serious about helping some jobs move there that could help our economy, so we could not be dependent on rooftops. And it really started. It really started to snowball, and my poor staff, we were so covered up with projects to review, and we held true to the 30-day review rule on plats. And we didn't, you know, bring them in and turn them down and lengthen the time. We stayed true to that. And that was partly due to the great planning commission we had led by Jim Hislop back in those days. And anyway, we were able to convince the development community to come and invest in Round Rock. And so it wasn't really too long until we got to 1993 and some fellow who was doing computer stuff in a dorm room on UT campus gave us a look.
Okay, and that was?
Michael Dell.
Okay.
The Dell story, you have to be, you just have to be real honest. Michael Dell never wanted to move to Round Rock in the beginning. He was, because of this notoriety, that we were aggressive and we would help with some tax abatements. By the way, we didn't have the half-cent sales tax at that time. Michael had a really good attorney that I had one project with in Round Rock that he and I had become pretty good friends, even though he didn't get anywhere with his project. This attorney convinced Michael Dell that let's use Round Rock to poke a stick at Austin, because we know Round Rock's going to offer us a lot of money. So we had a lunch meeting, and it was one of my all-time favorite meetings, because if you recall in Mad Magazine, The Spy versus Spy, you know, those two fellows that were always, well, this was one of those tricky meetings where I meet these folks at a local Round Rock restaurant. We're going to have a chicken fried steak, and so hey, Richard, how are you doing? And so let me introduce you to Tom and Charlotte. Hi, I'm Joe Vining, and you're Tom. I'm Tom. No cards, you know, I'm giving them a card. There's none of that. And so I was like, okay, whatever. And so immediately I started going, why are we here? You know, and my brain is trying to do all this. So we talked about just about everything under the sun that day, because Richard and I had developed a friendship. And we didn't talk anything about their company. And so finally, as we're getting to the end of the thing, I just started pressing and said, look, are you guys interested in our community? Well, yes. And I said, well, what do you do? We make things. And so I just kind of had a little chuckle. I said, okay, big things or little things, you know? Kind of medium. I said, bigger than a toaster? Yeah, but they wouldn't go any further than that. So, you know, we played these little games, and we were all laughing. It was kind of fun. You know, how many employees do you have? Well, we got some. 50? Yeah. 100? Yeah. 1,000? Probably. You know, and so I finally said, well, okay, Richard, where do we go with this? And so Richard says, so would you be interested in helping this company move to Round Rock? And I said, absolutely. I mean, their product is so fun and exciting. You know, I wouldn't, you know, just banter like that. But anyway, I tried to coax the name. I said, you know, I can't, how could I say anything without knowing who it is? And he said, well, we just want to know if you would offer a company that's from Austin, would you offer them an incentive to move to Round Rock? And I said, sure we would. You know, I didn't really kind of go into it, all that. I said, sure, we'd consider it. So into that meeting, the second meeting, we didn't fare any better about anything. And but they wanted to meet Bob Bennett and our city attorney and our finance director. And so the four of us had a very unproductive meeting. And so we said we'd get back together. And the finance director is a real no-nonsense guy, David Couts. He was. And so David said, you know, we can't really talk productively until I know how many folks you got and size of your payroll, and you know, what's the size of the building, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. So the third meeting, Bob's son, Brooks Bennett, was coming to City Hall at just about the same time. In fact, he drove in the parking garage at the same time that Tom and Charlotte drove in. Well, Tom had come from Minnesota. He had a Minnesota plate on his car. And so they kind of walked in City Hall at the same time, went up to the third floor. And so Brooks walks in his dad's office, and he says, "Dad, who are those folks?" And Bob says, "I don't know, some company we're talking to." And he said, "Well, their car has a Minnesota plate on it." And I just walked into Bob's office when I heard this, and I said, "Minnesota plate? Minnesota? They're 3M." Because 3M was big in the paper that day. They were really trying to buy a piece of land in Austin. It just wasn't going to happen. Environmentally sensitive, whatever. So, boy, we were just like, we know it's 3M, man. And it was going to be a huge plant, just huge, lots of employees and everything. So we were so confident. We go into the meeting, and we're a little cocky, you know. And so we go through the thing, and so we start putting some parameters on the number of employees, and that they actually build things for sale and that sort of thing, and that they would have a building over 200,000 square feet. And so we got to the end of the meeting, and so city manager Bob Bennett says, "So you're going to tell us who you are?" And he said, "Well, we can't do that yet." And he said, "Well, we figured out who you are. You're 3M. And so Tom chuckles and goes, "No, we're Dell." Well, the four of us guys just about fell out of our seat. And we were like, what do we do? How do you respond to this? Because they were already getting so large. And then, you know, my brain is saying, well, this is a trick, you know, they're wasting our time. Dell's not going to move to Round Rock, you know, because we already knew that they were looking at a couple of sites in Austin. It was kind of, the broker community was sharing too much information. So anyway, this kind of started the worst 9 months of our lives. It was like a giant roller coaster, because one day we're this high, and then the next day reality sets in and going, they got a contract on this land a quarter of a mile away from us. They're not, you know, and they had no land under contract in Round Rock. And so, you know, I'm advocating that this is a ploy, and I'm back and forth. And so the Business Journal's kind of picking up some, because everybody knew that Dell was out of space in the industrial park there. Completely out of space, couldn't get a parking space over there to save your soul, and whatever. So we finally got to probably a fourth, maybe our fifth meeting, since we knew it was Dell. And they came back with a term sheet, and they wanted 100% tax abatement for life. You know, never pay another property tax. And so Bennett essentially took their term sheet and went, you know, you guys are thinking too small. And I remember the look on Armstrong's face. Excuse me? And he said, we need to talk about sales tax. How much sales tax do y'all generate every year on your Texas taxable sales? Hadn't thought about it. Well, go home and think about it really quick, and let's meet as soon as you get the number. So when they came back with the sales tax number, holy mackerel, it was a mind blower. And so to end this saga, or shorten it somewhat, we agreed to share the sales tax with them. And we had a 1.5 cents sales tax at the time. We had a 0.5 cent, but when we passed that in '86, it was dedicated to transportation only. No economic development, no special projects, only transportation projects. So then we had our 1 cent, of course. So we devised a deal that we would share the 1 cent, and then we did a 60-year deal with them. Which, how'd you get to 60? Well, we just picked a number. Oh, I said 100. You know, and why was it so long? You know, and of course it was easy. Why was it so long? We didn't want them to ever leave. But, so we did a deal, but it wasn't so much the tax sharing. I think it was like a 60-40 deal. The reimbursement of the taxes was about 40% of their, to them, the value. The 60% was that we had to prove to them that they could build a 250,000 square foot building in less than 9 months. And so what I did is I assembled their team with our big team, you know, everybody was going to be involved. And we just got up on a board and said, okay, let's put down the opening date. What is your move-in date? And start working backwards with their architect in the room and their engineer. And, you know, there's all this, we can do that, you know. And so what we finally agreed was, and they wanted like 6 months, you know, they started out negotiating. But anyway, what we ended up doing is, from the city side, we decided, look, one of the things that takes so long is inspections. And we had a real small building inspection department, right? So we couldn't dedicate somebody over there 24 hours every day. And so we said, Michael, and by the way, this was going to be the very first building that Dell ever owned. Okay, everything else had been leased. And says, Michael Dell's not going to build something that he's not proud of, and that's going to fall down. So we said, we're going to turn the building over to your architect and your engineer. And the only thing we're going to inspect are life safety issues. And it's your building, and it's your guys, and it's their seal. And so the next meeting, man, that timeline started coming together, and we essentially reviewed the plans sheet by sheet. You know, we did a grading plan, and then we did this, and then we did that, and nobody knew what it was going to look like until the very end. The architects were working furiously to catch up with everybody else. And
so, what ultimately, what's the current footprint of Dell, or what was the maximum footprint of Dell?
Well, that one 250,000 square foot ended up being 7, and they still have a little bit of land yet left. But the model has changed significantly. And of course, we never did any manufacturing. We were the headquarters, and we were the R&D, and most importantly, we were where the sales took place. We were where that Texas taxable sale was built out of there. They were still building computers in Austin, and they extended some leases and kept doing that for a number of years until they had to move overseas and that sort of thing. But that was the way it worked.
Okay. And so after Dell, what are some of the other major companies that have come to Round Rock?
Right after that, we spent quite a bit of time pursuing Dell suppliers, which was a bad choice. Dell was extremely difficult on their suppliers. First, they started giving only 3-year contracts, and then it went down to 2, and then they would only go 1. Who could build a building with a 1-year contract, you know? Because if you didn't meet their standards, and we did 2 companies that we incentivized that lost their contracts and had to move out. But of course, you know, we had a performance standard in our agreements that when they couldn't, we didn't lose any money. In fact, we gained 2 buildings that we put people in. Farmers Insurance Group built a regional headquarters there. The Westinghouse plant, originally that was a gas turbine plant built back in '69, '70 when gas was real cheap, okay? The world changed in '73 and the plant lost 800 workers. 800 workers who had to go someplace else. Killed our poor little city, you know. That was part of the recession we were in when I started. They started building electric motors after that. And then you'll recall, I know you will recall, the superconducting super collider. Well, Westinghouse ended up being, well, along with the Fermi Lab in Chicago, ended up being one of the 2 finalists to build a prototype. And originally it was only going to be one, but our case was so strong that it was always going to go to Fermi. But we made such a good case that they gave us a shot. And we actually built ours faster, and ours worked, and theirs didn't work. And that was one tremendous thing. That only got up to be about 200 scientists and engineers and stuff. But of course, when Congress pulled the plug, literally, we lost those jobs, and then Westinghouse continued on, and their evolution has been incredible. But back to big motors, and then the Taiwanese electric company, TECO, started buying shares in that, and still build big electric motors. In the short past, we've done wind turbines, a lot of giant wind turbines there. So that was kind of interesting.
Well, you got into minor league baseball. How did that come about?
That was probably the most fun in my whole career, because I'm a baseball fan, yes, but when you're able to pull stuff together with some good people, really makes it fun. We tried, well, let me clarify that. There was an attempt, there was an attempt to secure minor league baseball in 1989 and 90. And unknown to our city council, the city manager and myself were out trying to, with a local businessman, make a deal on buying a minor league club and building a team. So there are so many steps involved in that, starting with you have to get approval from the National Association that approves all the minor league expansions, that you are worthy, that you got the dollars to do this, and you've got a community that will support it. And I won't go into all that, but that was a really fun experience. And so we got selected with Springfield, Missouri, as 2 expansion teams that were eligible to expand. But we had to pass another half cent to pay for the stadium. Well, unfortunately, in January 1990, the first Bush sent us into the desert for Desert Storm. And we had already called the election in November. And so we were having an election in January after we've just got the first set of boots on the ground. So you can imagine how poorly the turnout was, as well as how badly we were defeated on our half cent. Into baseball 1. So you have to fast forward then to 99, and and on that council that made the first attempt, we had a mayor to be Charlie Culpepper on that council. So, and Charlie was against the half cent. So when Reed Ryan, son of Nolan Ryan, called Charlie at his house one night out of the cold call, "Hey, Mr. Mayor, I'm Reed Ryan. I'm Nolan Ryan's son. I'd like to talk to you about minor league baseball." Who is this? You know, one of those kind of calls. They agreed to meet, and saying that Charlie was skeptical would be an understatement. But the good news is that all of the Ryan family are just as genuine as you ever would meet. And they're just perfect folks.
Reed would have been fairly young at this time.
He was, yeah.
Maybe still in college or right out of college?
No, approaching 30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe 27.
Okay.
Anyway, we started a conversation. They had shopped the deal. They knew Central Texas was the best location. That no minor league sports, nothing. You know, all we had was UT, and Austin didn't want to talk to him. Austin had actually made a AAA half effort sometime past, and it was bad politics. So anyway, we developed a lengthy conversation with Reed and his father and his brother Reese and Jay Miller and their financial advisor, and it essentially figured out a way that the city and the Ryans could partner to do this. And what happened, it ended up being the most unique deal in minor league baseball. In fact, I went kind of on the road is talking to other, like ICMA, about how do you build stadiums, that sort of thing, and how we partnered. And so what our amount of participation was determined by the mayor, who knew exactly how much we could generate out of hotel motel taxes. And that was it. We could generate $8 million a year, so that's it. We're in, you know. So the Ryans, who were committed to building a first-class facility, committed more than 12 in the beginning, and kept on adding on. So, but essentially, the major parts of the deal is this: city bought the land, city owns the land, city owns the stadium. It got built by Ryan and city money. We gave the Ryans a 38-year deal. It was 30 plus, got an extension of 38. And their lease payment was $1 a year. And they got to take all of the revenues that happened on that site, whether it was baseball, whether it was some parking lot event, whatever, concert. They did all that. But they had all of the maintenance responsibilities, okay? And of course, they were paying their debt service, you know, and we made them put $500,000 a year into a capital fund, and we matched that. So when capital improvements came due, there'd be money and nobody had to go in to sell COs or anything like that. Still a unique deal. Nobody else has been able to get a city that could cooperate on that kind of level or wanted to. And you had to have the market and all that sort of thing.
Been successful?
Well, the first year out, we opened in 2000. The Cinderella story, we won the Texas League right off the bat. We not only set attendance records for the Texas League, we beat every city but Sacramento in the AAA. And just was a huge success story. Reed got a bazillion miles traveling around that year telling the story all over the country in baseball circles. And I think one of the interesting and unique parts of the picture is we didn't really have a community gathering place until the stadium opened. And so even though Round Rock has always been a real strong baseball town, very strong high school, little league programs, people went to the Dell Diamond. I'll come back to that in a minute. They went to the Dell Diamond to socialize and do business. And yeah, they love baseball, and yeah, there is a subset of that group that you can't talk to while the game is on. They got their game hat on, and you know, they've got their scorecard. But the rest of it was a absolutely marvelous social gathering point where the community would come together. And a lot of charitable things happened as a result of people meeting people at the Dell Diamond, you know, cancer walks and all kinds of things like that happen and use the facility. So the Dell got the naming rights and has kept the naming rights, and that was just a real simple. The Ryans put out an RFP. They wanted Dell to do it, and Dell had the wherewithal. They could do that sort of thing. So.
Okay. So you started in Round Rock about 1980. When did you officially leave the city?
I left the city in April of 2006. And this is kind of a interesting ending to my career with the city, because at that time I'd already chosen my successor, Jim Stendebach, and I wasn't doing our day-to-day planning work. You know, I was only working on the big projects. We had a huge deal going with Simon to do a mall. We were chasing Bass Pro Shop very aggressively for over 2 years. And so I was working with my counterpart at the Chamber of Commerce, and we were the two lead guys on economic development. And again, for any incentive deals that came to the city, I'm the principal guy that marshals that through all the processes and that sort of thing. So Jim News, our city manager, Scott Martinez left the chamber to go to another state to take a job, and so I was coming over to Noose's office for a meeting. He said, you know, you need to go over there and do that job at the chamber. We don't need two guys doing economic development. And I went, are you firing me? And he said, no, think about it. So I thought about it for about 15 seconds and realized that what he was suggesting is that I'm essentially would be able to double dip, because I had way more than time enough in TMRS, you know, to do that. And so I could go make a nice salary at the chamber. And I could concentrate on just doing the things. You know, I didn't have to manage planning and code and blah, 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 all that stuff, GIS. So I did. I left on a Friday and moved my office over the weekend, and then Monday morning started at the chamber. And stayed there for a little over 5.5 years, and had a lot of fun. In fact, ended up, just before I finished my term, we recruited the world headquarters for Emerson Processing Technologies. They have over 900 employees, excuse me, 900. Moved into 2 shell buildings that got built before the economy went sour. And so they bought those and finished them out, and have now added a $30 million testing facility that just opened up 2 weeks ago. And you know, it was a really nice way to end my career with the chamber. And the only reason I left the chamber was that I had, within 5 days of 2 meetings, I had 2 friends come to me and ask me would I work on some projects out of state and parenthetically stay at the chamber. And I'm like, how could I do that? You know, they're going to kind of figure out if I'm taking off every Friday and every Monday, something's going on, you know. So I thought about that, and I said, you know, this is a good time for me to kind of do this. And I've always wanted to do a little bit of consulting, and so I thought, you know, what the heck. The first project didn't happen because there were 4 heirs to this huge estate, but they all had 25% interest, and no one could write a check. And they had enough land, it could have created a new small town. It could have been a new town. And it was very attractive to do this because they had water. But the family couldn't get together. The other project, Amazon.com was looking to build a big distribution center on the east side of Nashville. And unfortunately, our project came in second place. So that was a pretty short project. But as it turned out, I had 6 clients within 2 weeks, which scared me to death, being a one-man band, you know. But I was able to space them out and really take on, my mantra is this: I only take projects that are going to be fun. And I only made 1 slip up so far in that time, but it has been fun.
Well, you talked about Round Rock being 13.5 when you started work there. Mm. What's Round Rock now?
I think it's like 105, 106. Okay. Yeah. It was like 101 when I left. So, yeah. They, you know, the curve has finally started to slow down, obviously, because we're running out of land. They still have a sizable amount of land out in the northeast portion of the ETJ to expand in. But it'll take some time to do that. They're now looking inward, of course. In fact, one of the projects I'm working on is kind of interesting. HDR brought me on as a sub to do a downtown infrastructure plan for the old downtown. And you got to realize all the water and wastewater was WPA projects in the 30s, and so you can imagine they've gone way past their lifespan. And you know, the streets, and there was no drainage. You know, it's just whatever happens. So that's kind of interesting, and we're doing that. They hired me to be the interface between the public, since I know so much of those people, so many of them, and they know me. So it's kind of fun visiting with some old friends.
Okay. Let's go talk about professional associations.
All right.
I assume you got involved with AIP or ASPO?
You know, AICP was just, I'm sorry, APA was just starting, okay?
That was in '78.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
and how did you get involved? Somebody asked you to join? Or?
Well, so my city manager, Bob Bennett, who was a member of the predecessor, and so he encouraged us, and then the fellow that hired me, Paul Gambrell, had already passed his AICP exam when he hired me, and of course he said, you want to, as soon as you're eligible, you want to take this exam, you know. And
remember when you took the exam?
83.
Okay.
83. The national office looked at some of my prior experience and gave me some credits for that, so I was able to take it a little earlier than normally just in a straight planning office.
Okay. And then you also got involved with the organization?
Yeah, you know, since Dick Lilly was down with the city of Austin, and you know, so many people that I'd known over the years, and actually gone to school with a lot of them. It was kind of easy to get with the Central Texas area, and in fact, in 1983, State Conference came to Austin, so we had everybody in our office working on the project. Bennett just said, I can't see, you know, have somebody answer the phone, you know, that sort of thing. And in fact, I don't know whether you remember this or not, but we had a wine tasting one night where we picked people up at the hotel and took them on a little river joint on this little boat down to the Fiesta Gardens, and we had a Texas wine tasting because the Texas wine market was just in its infancy. And Paul was the wine connoisseur, and he led the wine tasting, in which we had to. It was extremely successful. I'll leave it at that. But it was a first state conference that I worked on, and then there were other Austin conferences, you know, and things like that.
So did you go on to be section director? Or?
No, I didn't. I was on the board.
In what capacity?
Gosh, it was so long ago. Dave, you got me on that one.
Or was it because you were a CPAT officer?
That's it. Okay. Thank you very much. Because I was the CPAT rep, okay, and I was officer in CPAT. And
so how'd you get involved in CPAT?
Well, that was a natural because my wife had gone to work in '78 for the Texas Municipal League, and since CPAT was one of the TML's divisions, their office, or I forgot what we called them. Affiliate, thank you very much. It was only natural that with the planning and then knowing most of these colleagues around the state, I couldn't very well not be involved in that. So I followed Jerry Ebert as the CPAT rep on that. So.
And one of the roles of CPAT is monitoring legislation. And
that would have been 1993.
Any particular battles or bills that you recall?
Yeah, that was the unfortunate year that we got locked into the battle. There was this, remember, we had a 10-acre minimum on subdivision. And the votes in the House were clearly going against us. They were trying, there was one bill for no no minimum, which didn't make any sense. And there was one for 3. And we had to end up making a 5-acre compromise, or it was the 1-acre deal was going to win. So, and that was extremely unpopular with all the planning directors, you know. I was kind of a persona non grata for a few months after that, because it was, you know, if you weren't involved in that day-to-day give and take down there, you didn't know how bad it could be, or how close we were to a terrible situation on that. But kind of sticks in my head. None of the successes I can remember. You know, it's all defeat, defeat, defeat. So,
well, sometimes that's the way it goes.
That is our success. Yeah. Can we get this thing killed?
And so you took the ASCP exam at some point in time. They recognized you with an election to the College of Fellows.
Yeah, also in '06, okay. And really very, very proud moment. Actually, I had already left the city, and so I didn't. Really wasn't, you know, I kind of lost some of that recognition in front of the council. Our chamber board was really nice to me on that. So, but that was a extremely interesting year, because, just as an aside, the community choir and our church choir got invited to sing in Carnegie Hall. And so all in the middle of all this, we made a trip to New York and sang in Carnegie Hall. It was quite a year.
Okay. And I noticed that you've been very active in your church and in charge of several of their visioning committees.
Yes. You know, when you become friends with your pastor, you know, he's, you know, that sort of thing. Plus, I have a distinction of I've been on all of our building committees since '86.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I've been there, done that.
That is quite an experience, and you know, you may have had some public participation stories in your planning career, but until you become involved in a building committee, wow. But it was quite rewarding experience. Very, our sanctuary turned out marvelous. So.
Okay. Well, looking back over your career, are there any people that kind of served as mentors to you? People that really kind of helped guide you? You've mentioned Bob Bennett several times, and Paul.
Yeah, you know.
Lily.
You know, when Bob made the leap from planning director to city manager, he kept his planning hat on forever. You know, he kept his AICP dues current, you know, and was still proud. And in fact, at one time, we had the most AICP members. We had 5 people in the city at one time for a city of less than 25,000. And that was Bob's. He would go to ICMA and he would, hey, you know, look at us, that sort of thing. Bob was an A&M grad, and so our planning philosophies did not exactly match up. The only thing that we matched up on was that we both felt like we could not manage the economy, that the economy was going to do what it was, and we had to manage our city to fit in with what the economy was doing at the time. And so Bob, I give him the credit because he gave me the freedom to negotiate freely with developers completely outside the bounds of our ordinances at the time. And I know what I just said, but nevertheless, and we immediately got into doing plan unit developments, as you might guess. But, you know, as a city of 15,000, we had no landscape ordinance. We had no tree preservation ordinance. And just by luck, A&M sent one of their classes up to do a tree survey for our community. You know, they connected through Bob. In fact, David Pugh, you know, was responsible for that. And Austin was in the early stages of their first landscape ordinances and some very, very, very strict tree protection. So I was able to piggyback on that after the success, just early success in '82 on a project, two projects right across the street from each other. The First Baptist Church was going to expand an education building, and they were going to take down 5 giant live oaks. I mean, what we would call a monarch today. And they were going to make a parking lot. So I went through a negotiation process on that. They only took down 1 tree. It was going to be right in the middle of the building. And then across the street, this fellow built a small office building and was going to take down 3. And again, just marvelous trees. And so we worked out a swap on parking and so forth. That was kind of the beginning of my negotiation career. And again, only because Bennett would stand behind me and give me the freedom to do that, and would do this with the city attorney, who you know, was a good friend, and finally said, you know, planned unit developments are a great idea, you know. So.
Any other mentors?
You know, Dick Lilly, obviously, I had a class or 2 from Dick, and gave me some great advice along the way. Terry Kahn, I got to tell you, Terry Kahn was the pipeline for me to get some extremely good talent. I had a difficult time getting Bob to agree to let me bring interns, even though when I started the intern, they were unpaid. There was no way I was going to get any money. Oh, you're crazy, you know. So after the first couple of interns were so good, and I must tell you that our interns were handed, here's an outline of an ordinance. Well, go to work, you know. And oh, by the way, you're going to present it to the Planning and Zoning Commission, okay? I'll present it to the council, but you're going to be at the P&Z. So we really gave them great opportunities to learn and to do and learn something. So kind of in the 80s, I was running so many people through my staff. 2 things. One, the interns was this churn, and then staff, because we were behind the curve on paying. I mean, I was keeping people 2 years, and off they went. And they were just, you know, I was just finally, not until the public works director was losing people to the private sector did he and I together convince Bob that we had to start doing a survey and pay market. But still, after that, Terry took on the chore of interviewing. I take the bait. He wouldn't call it interviewing. He would send me students. You know, obviously anybody could call me up and apply on their own. Nope, and many did. But Terry would say, you know, this person is really talented, they've got great speaking credentials, or, you know, whatever, that sort of thing. So he was a real big help.
Well, the flip side of that is, you talked about all the staff that you've kind of overseen, are there proteges or people that you have mentored that stand out in your mind that you've been particularly proud of?
When I was doing my application to be a fellow, I was I had two staff members who'd been with me forever. And so she could remember, you know, and we were filling it. We started to listen to these people. We got to 35 and quit. And we just went, oh, you know, we surely would have left out a couple on this thing, but excuse me. We knew a lot of them, and we had contact, and we'd get Christmas cards. And they were coast to coast. They were in Europe. I mean, they had some tremendous jobs. And, you know, when they would come back to Central Texas, you know, they'd come by and stop by and, hey, here's my kid, and all that sort of thing. So that was extremely rewarding. I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
Well, anybody in particular of that group?
I don't think I'll do that. Okay, just because I really had some talented folks. I stole some really good talent from the city of Austin, and
well, if you had advice to a young planner right out of school, what would that be? What would you recommend to a young planner to do?
Well, both advice to planners and to planning schools. The academic, and I must admit, maybe the programs have changed significantly enough in the recent past that they will allow students to pick and choose more helpful courses along the development side. So if you know that you're going to be a city planner, or you aspire to be a city planner, or maybe that you want to be a planner in the development community, you want to be a private sector. If those courses are not allowed or offered in the planning department, please encourage them to get over to the business school or whatever, or geography if they don't have a strong, most everybody has a strong GIS program nowadays. And so to be able to get a basic understanding of what the real estate market is all about, how that works. And in fact, that could be probably for APA if we offered a basics of real estate for introductory planners or something like that. I don't know, that just off the top of my head. So I found this great little book. I still have it. It's something like, it's a little blue paperback book. Whatever a young planner needs to know to be successful, something like that. But it was, that and old Paul Zucker had some great old publications that were kind of the basics of, if you're just entering the workforce for the first time, other than being fast food server, wait person, that sort of thing, here's how the business community works, and you need to respect various and sundry things. I remembered, I mentioned this earlier, that a number of my classmates were at a distinct disadvantage because there were 4 of us in our class that went through together that we'd already been in the business world. And other than fast food, pretty much no one else had those either summer opportunities, you know, that gave them some sense of, this is what's going on in the development community or the business community, and these are how decisions are made. So I think that is extremely important. And if you are a planning student right now and you really haven't, if you really don't know how a business deal, the basics of a business deal, that's something you need to go look up on your own if you can't find some courses like that.
You mentioned your classmates several times. Are any of those that you particularly stand out?
Frank Robbins,
Okay.
that I think's in Lago Vista, the last I heard, and John Warden, and I must admit I've lost track of John. The 2 of us and an Italian fellow named Sandro Pio had a study group. And the 4 of us became fast friends, and our wives were all good friends. And but all of us fit in that category, that we were a little older, we'd worked someplace. And I remember Alan Black was one of our profs. And so Alan was really interesting. Games and simulation was just starting up, you know, in the late 70s. And so Alan convinced Dean McClure to let him buy this development simulation. And I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was pretty crude and everything, you know, wooden blocks and things, giant Monopoly table. And we made this city, and we skunked everybody. We completely ruined the game because we we got to the end so quickly. I mean, in 2 days, we bought up we had locked all the good property up, and there was nothing left to secure. And part of it was because we understood negotiation, and we understood acquisition and strategic acquisition, and Sandro was one of these math whiz guys who could do math in his head. I mean, he was just like amazing TI calculator. Just, oh, we can do 6% because, you know. But anyway, there was Alan Black was a fun prof back in those days.
Well, you'd mentioned that your wife Carla was working at the Texas Municipal League, and she retired.
She retired here just the last couple of years and has taken a consulting position with the league. The league has a foundation called Local, Texas that's charged with helping Texas cities tell their story, and a little more in particular, as you know from your experience, explaining the bond process to citizens and convincing them that they need to vote in this transportation bond that's so big they can't get over that and that sort of thing. This helps the average citizen understand all the many things that a city does, from every day the water comes out, I flush my toilet, the trash gets picked up, and on and on and on. And so this would be a vehicle to help that message get across. And obviously our larger cities have whole departments that have budgets and can do this sort of thing. Our medium and small cities probably don't. They may have a PIO, but these 25,000 probably don't. It's the city manager, you know, and he's already got his boat full.
And Carla's title when she retired?
She was the deputy executive director.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of her major responsibilities was the magazine, Texas Town and City?
She was the editor for quite some time on that. I must admit she misses that. Don't tell anybody I said that. Yeah, she was real proud because she had the editorship for a long time and was able to, had the freedom under past executive directors to change the way the magazine looked and have a lot better articles and that sort of thing. So.
And just out of curiosity, how did you two meet?
We were set up. I had a real good friend that I knew actually from junior high, that we'd lost contact and reconnected at Boys State and then back at UT. But anyway, his wife and Carla were taking tennis together, and so Elka, the matchmaker, invited me over for spaghetti one night, and I went, oh, I need to go back to the lab, and you know, you could eat and leave in a hurry, and so because of that, she said, oh, you're going back to campus? Would you do me a favor? Oh, what is that? I've got this pattern. Would you return this to my friend at the Scottish Rite dorm? And I went, oh gosh. So I did, and so I returned the pattern, and I said, how about let's go get a beer?
Okay.
So.
And then you have one daughter?
We have only one daughter, yes. And
TCU grad?
she is. She got her BA and her MA at TCU, worked in their admissions department until they got moved to Kansas City, and then she went to work for KU for a few years doing the same thing out there.
Okay. Couldn't convince her to be a planner, though?
No, I couldn't convince her to go to UT either. Her mother was pushing her out the door. So.
Well, before we end this, you and I share a interest in sports cars.
We do indeed.
Sports car racing.
We do.
How did you get involved with that? Obviously, parents being a mechanic probably had something to do with that.
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. Unfortunately, you know, in those formative teenage years, you know so much more than your parents, and so I made some terrible mechanical choices in fixing cars. Anyway, so I didn't get introduced to sports cars until 1970, and I bought a Triumph TR4 for $500. Beautiful British Racing green, just a neat car, and it was just so much fun. And the next thing you know, I found this sports car club in Austin called the Texas Spokes Sports Car Club, and they were a big autocross club. And so next thing you know, I'm autocrossing my Triumph, and then about that same time, the Sports Car Club of America was on to some hard times because they'd lost some tracks. There's no place to go race. And they didn't want to go over to North Richland Hills area, Green Valley Raceway. And so a couple of folks formed a racing organization called Green Valley Racing Association. And so you could go race your sports car up there. So I knew a couple of guys who'd gone and done that, and I went, man, I want to do this. And I had gone to Green Valley. In fact, I was at Green Valley when Shelby had his Mustangs out there. Just by luck, I had a good friend who drug me out there. So that was my introduction to sports car racing. But anyway, I bought a Bug-Eye Sprite and started racing it. And it was so nice. Everybody used to come up to me and say, that car is too valuable for you to race. And so I had an MG Midget, and I took them at their word and took all the goodies off and raced the Midget and promptly wrecked the Midget. So, you know. But anyway, I got into sports car racing and then moved to an MGB and won a couple of championships in 73 and 74. And then, of course, I met Carl in 75, so my racing activity dropped off.
But you still restore cars? You have a current project?
I do. I've got two MGs. I have an MGB that I've had since '94. That's kind of an older restoration. And then I've got a 61 MGA that I'm restoring right now. That's been a longer term project than I thought it was going to be, but I'm getting to spend some more time on it than I have been. So.
Well, we've talked about a lot of stuff today. Is there anything else that you haven't talked about that you want to talk about? No, I think it's you should be congratulated on taking the time to do this project. I think it's going to be interesting for a lot of people if they will take some time and listen to some of our planners. We've certainly been extremely fortunate in our state to have some marvelous folks that have gone into the profession and done some very, very good work in their lives. So I think it'll be a good archive. And I want to thank you for spending time with us. So
thank you, Dave. Appreciate you asking me.
Sure.